As its name suggests, the European Union is all about uniting Europeans rather than dividing them. But in the past, when new countries have joined the Union, people wanting to cross a land border into the EU's territory have suddenly faced new restrictions like visa requirements and customs checks. We travelled to the border between Slovenia and Croatia to see how the group has helped bring a common-sense solution to the everyday needs of people living either side of the border. The wine harvest may be a long way off and the weather may be cold, but relations between Slovenians and Croatians are warm and friendly. I'm standing right on the external border of the European Union. On this side, Slovenia, and over here, Croatia, which were, of course, until relatively recently part of the same country, Yugoslavia. In fact, for centuries, there was no border here at all. But when Slovenia joined the European Union in 2004, the European Commission proposed tough new border security rules that would have caused a great deal of inconvenience to people living all along this frontier. It was the EPP-ED Group that led action to dilute the Commission's proposal. In Slavko's case, that's just as well, otherwise he would have had to do a round trip of 20 kilometres to an official border crossing. Instead, he just walks across the border from Croatia into Slovenia. As a resident of the border zone, he carries a special permit, excusing him the time-consuming process of visa and customs checks. Essentially, it means that life carries on just as it always did before Slovenia joined the EU. So Slavko can pop across the border any time to see his Slovenian friend Robert and to share a glass of last year's wine.
It's really important the way we cross the border because it's not a densely populated area. People who live here, we know each other, and the past that we have is a good thing because it's made life much easier for people.
Our lives would otherwise be much more difficult, but this border pass makes it possible for us to cross the border at various places. My family has some land on the Slovenian side of the border and a wine cellar on the Croatian side. If this pass did not exist, popping over to see our friends, drinking a glass of wine or having some lunch would be much more difficult for us and our families. So it was a good idea to set up the pass system because it has made life easier.
If the Commission's plan had become law, then Slavko and others like him would have had to come here to this crossing point some 20 kilometres out of their way just to cross the frontier to see families and friends. And it's largely thanks to a Slovenian MEP, Michael Brec, that the Commission's plan was sufficiently watered down so as not to disrupt the lives of local people living either side of this frontier. We spoke to Mr. Brec about his role in amending the Commission's proposal to reflect the reality of everyday life on the border.
Življenje ob zunanjih mejah Evropske unije za nikogar ni prav prijetno.
Life on the external borders of the EU is not pleasant for anyone because it's usually less prosperous or there are tighter controls. Therefore, people living on the border tend not to have a good quality of life.
Več policijske in vsake druge kontrole. In tako nekako.
When Slovenia entered the European Union, all those problems were made worse. People on either side of the border still had to cross the borderline daily, but they were subject to even tighter controls.
Where did the demand for this legislation come from?
Slovenija je del Evropske unije.
Slovenia is part of the EU and we have to respect the rules relating to border security.
Komisija je pripravila uredbo.
The Commission prepared a draft regulation which envisaged a lot of formal restrictions for crossing the border. We, as the EPP-ED Group, we had to react to this inconvenience.
What does your report say about the approach of the EPP-ED Group towards European integration?
Mene še posebej veseli, ker je Evropska ljudska stranka, Evropski demokrati.
I'm especially grateful to the EPP-ED Group because it has invested a lot of energy in this issue, not only by visiting the border, but also everything else it has done. The group was sensitive to the real needs for people who live on the border. This legislation, as it is today, makes a normal life possible for people on the border.
There are many bigger issues to which the EPP-ED Group has turned its attention in the past 5 years, but this legislation is an example of how the group is on the side of ordinary people and trying to make life easier for all of us throughout Europe.